One of the most popular of fictional genres is the apocalyptic slash post-apocalyptic genre. We can see examples of this everywhere. Earth Abides, I Am Legend, The Stand, Mad Max, The Walking Dead, the list goes on. We live in a world, and I suppose it's only morbidly natural to speculate about how that world might possibly end. And this genre of writing really exploded in the 20th century when humankind gained many more ways by which our world might feasibly end. But where did this genre begin? What was the first work of apocalyptic fiction? What was the first book to explore the end of the world? Well, I believe I have found that book, and I think that that book would be this book right here, The Last Man by Jean-Baptiste Francois Xavier Cousin de Grainville. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably butchering it, but I'm doing my best. So, this book was the life's work of its author. Jean-Baptiste, whatever, was a French priest who lived roughly around the time, I believe, of the French Revolution. That's right, this book is old. It is over 200 years old. It was first published, I believe, in 1805. And it is, like I said, pointed to as being the first work of apocalyptic fiction, the first book that tackled the end of the world. And so I wanted to read this, on a lark. It's kind of it's more than kind of an obscure book at this point. Very few people are probably aware of it. It's been vastly overshadowed by Mary Shelley's later book of the same title, The Last Man, although her book actually does not share really any plot similarities with this book. But I wanted to read it just to see where it all began, see where ground zero was for one of the most popular of fictional genres today. And you know what? This book is actually really good. I was kind of shocked at just how good this book actually was. I went into it with very low expectations, but they were exceeded. They really were. This book was, again, kind of shockingly good. But anyway, what is The Last Man? Well, like I said, it was the life's work of its author, and Jean-Baptiste, whatever, wanted to write an epic poem in the vein of John Milton's Paradise Lost. However, whereas John Milton dealt with the first human couple, Adam and Eve, in his work, Jean-Baptiste, whatever, wanted to explore humanity, the last human couple, humanity's last pair at the end of days. And I think this could be categorized as an unfinished work because, as I'm given to understand it, this was meant to be in its final form an actual epic poem like Paradise Lost, but it wasn't. He wrote the whole thing out in prose, although it's divided up into cantos like poems typically are. So I think he was intending to come back and redo it at some point, but he died before he could do so. So it's written in prose, but it's divided up into cantos like a poem. But anyway, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, so it's not like it's incomplete. But I do think it could be categorized as an unfinished work because I think it was meant to be revised later on. But what is the story of The Last Man? Well, it's about the end of the world, a divinely ordained end of the world. Yes, its author was a priest, and so it kind of presages the Left Behind series because it deals with a biblical apocalypse, however loosely. Because even though it is kind of steeped in religion, it actually plays pretty fast and loose with that religion. But um, the book opens with a frame narrative because there is nothing that people back in this time period liked more in their books than a frame narrative, a framing device. You can see this all the time, like in Melmoth the Wanderer, in Frankenstein. There's always a larger story, and then the main story is contained within it. And this book plays right into that. So the book opens with an unnamed narrator entering a cave in Syria where dwells what is called the spirit of futurity, which gives to him a vision of the end of the world in the last man. Because the spirit of futurity tells him it should be that someone remembers the last man, and someone knows of him, because after him there won't be anybody to know about him. So we're getting kind of this futuristic history, like a future history, as the vision shown to this nameless narrator. And in the world of this vision, the world of the last man, things aren't going too well. God has pretty much decided that the time's up for the earth. It's time to wrap things up and do away with the human race. And everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Fields are no longer fertile. Crops are not growing like they should. The moon has been destroyed. The sun is about to go out, and people have become infertile. The population has just declined to almost nothing. However, there is born one male child, christened Omegarus. Yes, a little on the nose there. Omegarus, the titular last man. And he is prophesied to be the only person capable, the only male capable of siring more children. He is the last fertile man. And it is also prophesied that there is one woman out there in the world somewhere who is the last fertile woman who will be capable of bearing those children. So this really is kind of like the anti-Adam and Eve. It is the last of humanity. And Omegarus one day is visited by the spirit of the earth. And now this is where it gets kind of interesting, because in a book that's dealing with again, however loosely, a biblical apocalypse, you would think that the devil would be the villain in this story, but he's not. In fact, Satan is, I don't really think he's even mentioned in this. The villain of the story is filled by the spirit of the earth. He is kind of the Gaia essence of planet Earth, and he tells Omegarus, he says, look, I was told on the day of my creation by the big man that once all of humanity has died out and there is no more humanity to populate the earth, my time is up and the earth will be destroyed. So for my sake, you guys to go out there and find that last woman out there who can have kids with you, and you got to get to making babies so I can, keep living. So Omegarus is like, aye, aye, Captain. So he sets out to go find the last fertile woman and knock that honey up. So he gets on an airship, and this is interesting as well because it takes place in the future. I don't think it's ever stated exactly when this book takes place, but it takes place sometime in the future. And the technological innovations that are depicted in this are few and far between, because it's the farther back you go, the harder it was to predict where things would go. But Jean-Baptiste, whatever his name is, he does predict air travel, because at the time that he lived, hot air balloons were becoming, in vogue. We were discovering that it is possible to leave the ground. So he theorizes that airships will eventually be a thing. So that's something. It's something, like I say. But that's about as far as he goes in terms of technological speculation. But anyway, so Omegarus and company set out to Brazil, where he then meets Sideria, the last fertile woman, and they get married. But then shortly after they're married, they're told, look, you can't have kids because there's some ancient prophecies or something. There's a lot of that stuff going on in here, ancient prophecies and stuff. And they're like, if you have kids, then your children will be a race of barbarians, and they'll be evil and bloodthirsty, and it'll just be a terrible time all around. So don't have kids. So there's lots of kind of romantic melodrama between Omegarus and Sideria, as they're like, what do we do? Do we get down to making babies or do we not? And then Adam, that's right, the biblical Adam, the first man who has been condemned throughout the ages to watch his ill-fated progeny march headlong into hell for his disobedience, is sent by God to contact Omegarus and tell him, look, don't do it, don't have kids, time's up, we got to let humanity end so eternity can begin. And so Omegarus is eventually persuaded to leave Sideria, his wife, and then some things happen. This is where it kind of goes off into like the book of Revelation, although again it plays it pretty fast and loose, but we witness the resurrection of all the human dead from throughout the ages, and that's a really striking scene. And then Sideria sets out to track down Omegarus, but then she dies. And then the spirit of the earth is like, oh crap, I'm doomed. And then the sun goes out at some point, and then the earth explodes and is destroyed. And the book ends with the dawn of eternity. So that's the plot of this book. It's you could categorize this, I think, as a work of science fantasy. It does have, like with the airship thing, light elements of sci-fi, but it's also heavily fantastical with ancient prophecies. Also, like the Left Behind books, drawing from the Bible's book of Revelation. But it's actually pretty compelling, actually. And, you know, for a book that was intended, at least I think intended to be revised and rewritten in a poetic format, the writing in this book is remarkably striking. Like, it is a beautifully written book at times. And this is one of the most imagistic books I think I have ever read. There are so many starkly evoked images in this book of just abandoned, crumbling citadels and palaces gone to ruin, and a gray, ashen sky with a sun that's flickering out like a light bulb. That's not what will eventually happen to the sun, if you didn't know, but, you know, this guy apparently thought it was. But it's all very powerful. It's very powerful imagery in this book. And the characters in this book aren't very good, but there's a little flicker of something towards the end, especially in the tension between Omegarus and Sideria when they're both having to wrestle with, like, do we want to start a family, and continue the human race, or should we just let it go? And there's actually something there, but again, the characters in this are pretty thin. However, there is also some inner turmoil with Adam, who plays a major role in this, because he's like, look, I've watched eons of people just be hurled into hell. I don't want to do it anymore. Just let the human race end. And so it has enough in that area, I guess, to be somewhat compelling. But this book not only draws from the Bible, it also includes many Malthusian concepts. So if you don't know who Thomas Malthus was, he was an English statesman, as well as a political philosopher who postulated many theories regarding population and economics and resource sustainability. And he's kind of a maligned figure now, often scoffed at, but I think his stuff was very important. I think the theories that he put forward and what he talked about carries a lot of weight. The reason that he's kind of scoffed at now is because he predicted that there would eventually come a time where human population would outstrip our resources, leading to devastation. And historically, we humans have been pretty good at either creating new resources or making do at the very least. And so, like I said, he's kind of scoffed at now. But I think Thomas Malthus's work actually is very important and carries still quite a bit of weight. But there's a lot of that in here. Even though this takes place in a barren future where humanity has become infertile, there's lots of kind of discussion about population and what that population can get to before it just implodes on itself and just doesn't have enough resources to support it. So it's a very thoughtful book, and again, the imagery in this book is very striking. And honestly, I was kind of shocked at how good this book actually was. Like, I went into this with pretty low expectations. I just read it on a lark just to see, where the the starting point was for this genre, but I was actually taken aback by just how good it actually was. It's it's a heck of a book. It really kind of stays with you. Again, the images that it evokes of just this dying world that's just crumbling to dust. It's powerful. It really is. So to rate The Last Man by Jean-Baptiste Francois Xavier Cousin de Grainville, I hope I'm pronouncing that halfway right. To rate The Last Man, I'm going to give this book an A. I really am. The writing is, at times, beautiful. The story moves very quickly. It's not a long book. It's only 135 pages, I think. It's not long. It moves very quickly, but it maintains your interest. And the characters aren't great, but there's just enough kind of drama within and between them, especially towards the end when Omegarus and Sideria are told not to do what they thought they were supposed to have done. It's interesting. It really is, and it's just actually kind of an underground gem at this point. I don't think this book was ever very popular even when it was first published. I think it was kind of an under the radar thing, but man, sometimes the best jewels are those that are the best hidden. And this is one of those. I'm giving this an A. I'm giving The Last Man an A because it actually surprised me just how good it was. So, The Last Man by Jean-Baptiste Francois Xavier Cousin de Grainville. Have you read The Last Man? I'm willing to bet money that you haven't because this is a very obscure book at this point. But if you have, on the off chance, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with me with anything I've said about it here today. And if you have not read The Last Man, I could recommend this, seriously. This book surprised me in more than one way, and I really could recommend picking this book up, maybe starting a little renaissance for this most unsung of books, but one that is quite influential historically. And always, as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.